Hi and welcome. Iris Benrubi here, your host for Building Relationships in Isolation. And today I'm really excited because I've got a special guest that I've interviewed before. I've got Dr. Marc Gafni. Welcome.
Thank you, Iris. It's great to see you again.
Nice to see you. And I want to tell you a little bit about Marc. He's a visionary. He's a social activist, a passionate philosopher. He's the author of 10 books. And he's also, what would you call yourself, the founder of the Center for Integral Wisdom?
Co-founder with my friend Ken Wilbur and Sally Kempton and Mariana Kaplan. And, I'm co-president with Zach Stein. Kirsten is our awesome executive director. Right, where it's a great unique self-symphony with several dozen thought leaders. I was privileged to initiate it. Zach Stein and I are co-presidenting it. And there's Kirsten is a fabulous group of human beings who actually paradoxically, what we've been involved with the last 10 years, Iris, is looking at how catastrophic risk was going to begin happening and why we actually need, in response to it, actually a new source code. In other words, just talking about changing this structure or changing that structure is not going to work. What we've been saying for a decade is that there's going to be a series of catastrophic risks. Those catastrophic risks are actually dress rehearsal for existential risk, right, of a more severe nature, and our ability to move through it, to navigate this moment between utopia and dystopia, which is really where we are. We're at a particular pivoting point in reality, depends not just on, although science is important, the exterior sciences, vaccines or not vaccines, all the different structural issues. But we also, in order to enact what we need to enact, we need actually a new constitution. A new constitution for what it means to be a human being. What's our narrative of identity? Who are we? What's our universe story? Who are we? So this is a moment of just intense pain and intense possibility.
And what I want to say is I saw something that Barbara Marx Hubbard said is that crisis is an evolutionary driver. So could you speak to that?
Well, crisis is, it's Barbara and I talked about this often. It's very beautiful. I think I heard a rumor that you're a native original Hebrew speaker at some point. So you might be familiar with the word shvira, shever. So shvira means to break. And shever also means in the original Hebrew in the book of Genesis, Vayar Yosef ki shever b'Mitzrayim. Yosef sees that there's shever, and shever means their food. Right? In Tanakh, right, in the Bible, it's also food means nourishment. He sees there's nourishment. So shvira, the crisis, the breaking, right, also has with it a dimension of shever, of nourishment, of possibility, or a different way to say it is emergency generates emergence, right? That's actually the nature of reality. Now, where Barbara and I merge memes in this phrase, crisis and evolutionary driver, is Barbara's very beautiful phrase. And I appreciate you evoking Barbara, who was and is my evolutionary partner, and we just did the first year anniversary of her passing. And we did a big memorial service at One Church, Many Paths, One Mountain, which is our weekly broadcast that I did for, a couple hundred weeks with Barbara. And we're now, moving forward in a big way. But what I tried to add, and the way we merged memes and tried to deepen that, and this is really related to your topic today, Iris, is that what's the nature of the crisis? So let's add two sentences. Every crisis has two dimensions. It's a crisis of intimacy, and it's a crisis of imagination. That's unbelievably important, right? And that's not a homiletic idea. It's not a metaphor. It's not mythopoetic. It's actually the structure of reality. So, and as if you have single-celled organisms, and they're in an oxygen crisis because they don't know how to create intimacy with the environment, what they do is that crisis of intimacy generates the explosion of a new birth of life, which is multicellular life. We move from eukaryotes to prokaryotes, from prokaryotes to eukaryotes, right? And multicellular life is the next leap on the evolutionary chain that generates you and me, right? So our crisis, whenever you have a crisis and it's real, it basically goes like this, 10 seconds and back to you. Step one, reality is relationships at its core. That's what reality is. But again, not homiletically. right? Not mythopoetically, for realsies, or ontologically, for real. Reality is all the way up and all the way down. Reality is relationship. Step one. Step two, right? Every crisis is a crisis in relationship. Step three, the crisis in relationship generates an evolution in relationship. So evolution is the evolution of relationships, right? So a crisis of intimacy means it's a crisis in relationship. So what do you need to do? You need to reimagine your intimacies. You need to reimagine, right, relationship. And I believe when you and I talked the last time, we talked a little bit about a book that's going to come out in a few months, Rollmate, Soulmate, and Wholemate. Right?
Yes.
These three levels of relationship. There's a crisis at the soulmate level of relationship. Reality is relationships, right? Subatomic particles come together to create an atom. Atoms come together, relationship, right, to create a molecule. Molecules come together to create a macromolecule. It's relationship. Crises in relationship generate new configurations of intimacy. So we need to now reimagine relationship. And now that we're in lockdown in many parts of the world, so that's a whole new place to reimagine relationship from, right? So I wanted to give us the widest context for this conversation. It's not just a detail happening. This is actually a moment of crisis, but it invites an evolution of relationship on every level.
Yeah,
Wow.
I can speak from my end in that this whole lockdown has just created a slowdown in my life and a beingness with the family together and meals and walking in nature, something I never had time for. I was always busy. So if we start to look at, let's start from the perspective of people who have worry, concern, finances, the economy, their own income that's either drastically reduced or non-existent, that are feeling that anxiety, that fear, that concern, the stress. How would you address that?
It's a beautiful inquiry and it's a critical one, Iris. And maybe let's go back with just one short step. I mean, maybe the first thing that we all need to do, right, is to feel beyond ourselves. That's step one, right? In other words, we're in a moment of there's 2,500 people still dying a day. That's a 9/11 every day. And strangely enough, we get jaded very fast. We get used to it. We were moved by it a few weeks ago. Now it's just happening. And so we could just take a moment just to breathe with all the people who can't breathe, right? It's a respiratory element, right? In the original language that you and I are familiar with, right? Soul and breath are the same word, neshama, neshima. So let's just take a second maybe together, and anyone listening, right? Let's just breathe. Let's take 3 breaths and just breathe into anyone who can't breathe now, right? So no, thank you.
As soon as you said, let's slow down and breathe, I could just even feel my body go back and just get grounded, even the sound of my voice.
Right? We can find ourselves, right? You can feel. Now from there, we have to find in many of these people, first of all, it may be us, it may be people listening. There are 26 million people who've applied for unemployment.
Mm,
That's a big deal,
yeah.
right? Before this happened, there was a huge swath of the world, but let's particularly talk for a moment about the United States, who didn't have access to what Joe Stiglitz, the economist, called global public goods: healthcare, retirement, childcare, right? And it's just, basic income. So America, for good reason, and here we got to be careful of neoliberalism, America's funded a huge part of the world. And America has poured money into NATO, poured money into defense. America's done more funding of the world than any other country. And so I'm very wary about a kind of neoliberal or alt-left anti-Americanism. America's done great things, and let's be proud of America with all of its flaws, right? God bless America, right? In a deep and beautiful way, and because of all that funding and because of structural flaws in our understanding of who we are, America has not afforded basic human dignities to huge swaths of its population. And in that sense, America has been moving towards being a failed state, right, for quite a while. That's now amplified and exacerbated, right, by Corona. But not only America, the entire system of reality has been an extended, what David Snowden calls complicated system, right? And the way I understand that is it's a system in which there's no allurement between the parts. This is part of a larger conversation, a complex system, right? Brazilian rainforest. There's allurement between the parts. We're inherently connected to each other. Complicated system, a Ferrari, right? There's no allurement between the parts, so it breaks down easily. So we've optimized for complicated systems because we've optimized for quarterly reports and efficiency. And we haven't optimized for resiliency, which is another word for love, right? And care, right? And nourishment. And so the second thing is just to feel, wow, right? Lots of us are facing huge financial pressure. For lots of people, 80% of America lives from paycheck to paycheck, kind of almost an unknown fact, right? And so there's enormous, Maslow level 1 pressure, people's lives, small businesses, the amount of small businesses that are going under that will never start again. They'll never start again. They won't be able to get the capital together, right? The laying off of workers, the levels of devastation and the cascading implications of that devastation for generations. And so what's going on here is, right, it's not like, okay, it's a quick fix, right? The fragility of the system has been exposed, and there's an enormous toll, right, in human pain and suffering. And so that's real. That's real.
Yeah.
From there, there's also blessing, right? And, I actually like that old phrase that, my parents used to use, which I kind of hated when I was a kid. It seemed like such a tacky phrase, but as you get older, that phrase, it has a silver lining. Remember that, right? It's got a silver lining, right? So there is a silver lining here, right? And that is that in this breakdown, there's an invitation for a breakthrough. And the breakthrough is fundamental. It's both collective and personal. And it's about re-asking the big questions of life. Who am I? What am I here for? Right? The music stopped. Right? We thought it was too big to fail. Right? We thought it could never fail, but it's not too big to fail. I mean, I've been crying for 10 years it's going to fail. Right? And everyone kind of laughed at me like, whatever, give us the spirituality stuff, give us the nice dharma. No, guys, don't you understand? It's going to break down. Right? And I would have been delighted to be wrong. Right? For sure. But it's not just, we have to actually now fix it at the core. Right? The New York Times, I don't know, just had a piece, Iris, about a week and a half ago. It was a beautiful piece, and it was their best attempt. They couldn't quite get there. But they asked the question, we need to ask what the country owes its citizens, what the corporation owes its employees, and the most poignant, and what we owe each other. But of course, then they said, well, how are we going to know that? And they didn't quite have an answer, right? And you can only know that if you have a narrative of identity. Who am I? And who am I? And that's what we need to be doing in this moment. We need to be surviving. But we also need to be having conversations that we haven't had with ourselves and with our beloveds and with life itself.
Yeah, I was going to say, in this moment where people are really struggling for survival, and the society, the world, the earth is requiring of us a different conversation. It's kind of, where do they focus? If they can't put food on the table, how do we have that conversation about the bigger conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And those conversations sometimes need to be split up, right? First, let's get everybody masks. Second, let's figure out, how we can create some sort of antidote, some sort of drug treatment, if not vaccine, right? In other words, third, let's share our resources, right, with people that need our help. And let's find people and let's share our money. And sometimes let's share our house. If we have 2 extra rooms in our house, and there's a family that we know can't afford their rent, let's break the rules and let's invite them to move in for 6 months. I mean, let's actually, our love lists are too short. Our love lists are too short.
Generosity is what I hear.
Right. This is a moment for generosity.
Yeah.
Right. And generosity is the true nature of who we are. right? It's a moment not for what we've talked about it, not for ordinary love. It's a moment for outrageous love. And everyone has a particular calling. There's someone they can call that's somehow left out of the circle. And they have some resource for that person. And it may be financial, right? And by the way, I just want to say the financial thing. We think our money's ours. Why would we think that? Such a strange idea, right? We're all born in a particular circumstance of privilege and promise. And we're born with particular gifts that allow us to fulfill it. But we might have been born more depressed, or we might have been born with less opportunity, right? And this is this time around, right? Let's just get out of this notion that it's mine. Yeah, it's mine. Of course it's mine, and it's yours. It really is yours, right? In a real way. You know, the Hebrew word, very beautiful for charity, is tzedakah, as you know, which means justice. It's about what's just. And what's just is, I've got something for you, you've got something for me, and let's exchange and let's help each other, and let's explode the narrow, separate self, isolated nuclear family that instead of exploding implodes on itself. So there's a moment here for everyone listening and for myself, and right, what do I have to offer? And the joy, the utter joy of taking my seat at the table and participating, right, and making this right. And actually, I can impact here. That's huge.
What comes up for me is one of my friends felt really isolated, single woman at home, and feeling like all of her married friends, well, they have each other, I'm on my own. And then she ended up calling them. And this was just pre-COVID. And they said, well, come over and have dinner with us. That's what you're talking about, that intimacy. She opened up, she was vulnerable, and she created that bond with them. She allowed them to step in and say, come on over, join us over here.
Right.
We have something to offer.
Totally, right? And everyone's got something to offer. There's no one at this moment who doesn't have a unique gift that's needed somewhere in their circle of intimacy and influence. There's not one person on the planet, right, who doesn't have something to exchange. And imagine that we all begin exchanging. Imagine an economy of exchange, right? An economy of outrageous love, in which every person is giving their unique gift into the larger circle of intimacy and influence. And all of a sudden, you begin to have a self-organizing universe. Right? The universe begins self-organizing towards the good. And it's not command control, right? It's not top down, but it's actually a bottom-up, grassroots, authentic emergence. And the cosmos begins to self-actualize. And you begin to kind of manifest this self-actualizing cosmos. Like, wow, like what a, right? Like, wow. And that's enormously important. And I want to say one other thing that's unpopular. You know, someone wrote me before the show, a couple, you know, you always get a couple of those, and said, you're going on this show with this woman, Iris, right? I understand that she's affiliated with Donald Trump and Dr. Phil. I don't know exactly how she got that. And she sent me some link of some picture of you with Phil McGraw or something like that. I don't remember what it was, or
interviewed.
Right. So whatever it was. And it's just amazing how quick. So I wrote back, I said, wow, I didn't know. Right. And so I wrote back, but it's just amazing how quick we move to demonize people. Now, in this moment, right. And, you know, clearly, you know, President Trump, you know, has some leadership qualities, which, you know, leaves something to be desired, right? There's some issues there, right? And I think, you know, lots been written about that. I don't need to add to it, but let's just stop the punching bag. You know, we want to vote them out. That's what a democracy is, right? But the kind of intense hatred and vilification, let's stop, right? You know, we can object. We can say he's wrong, right? But what we do is, when we can't find our own eros inside the circle, so we put all our energy into making someone else bad, right? And that's actually, and even if the person is bad, let's say Osama bin Laden, remember in the 9/11. So if we kill Osama bin Laden, the world will be good. Well, no, Osama bin Laden was an expression of a larger fabric, right? Of just devastatingly, shockingly, you know, problematic structures of reality. And so it's really a moment not to get inside the circle by placing someone else outside, right? That's not what this moment's about. This is a moment to bring people inside the circle. And I wanna just do something, just surprising, right? Because most of my friends are neoliberal, and most of my students, I want to do something surprising. I want to invite and thank President Trump for all the work that he has done. Right? Right? In other words, whatever he's done wrong, which I'm sure there's much of, he's tried hard. He doesn't hate people, right? He wants people to get better. It may be above his pay grade, it may not, but let's stop the demonization.
Yeah, so let's talk about the practical. I mean, we've got all kinds of
Right.
comments here from hello and love from the UK and love from Germany and bring people inside of the circle. Yes. So if we're going to bring this down to the practical for the people who are listening to this interview, what is the practical way we can start to bring people into the circle?
Yeah, I'd say three things. One, I would say step one, use this time to bring a part of yourself into the circle that wasn't in the circle.
Hmm.
I give two
That again.
practical ways to do it. Okay, is that okay? Can I jump in?
Yeah,
Two
yeah.
practical ways to do it, okay? Way one, what part of your personhood have you split off? A dimension of your greatness, a dimension of your creativity, a dimension of your vulnerability, right? This is a moment, and you were talking about the slowing down,
Mm.
right? Right? So this is a moment to actually bring into the circle part of yourself that was split off. One. Two, everyone has a piece of unfinished business. That's also outside your circle, right? It's a beautiful phrase, unfinished business, right? So you have a piece of unfinished business you didn't have time to finish, someone you didn't apologize to, someone you needed to actually write a letter to, right? Something that's right. And everyone knows, everyone can find immediately when you say unfinished business, everybody knows what it is. So get that unfinished business finished. That's a
Mm.
big deal. Okay, so those are the first two steps.
So let me just say one thing. It's those
Please.
things that we've put up on the shelf to take them off the shelf and have an opportunity to integrate.
Totally, right? This is time to, right, bring that which has been split off inside, right? And then number two, and this is a big deal. I would invite everyone, we're at a moment where everyone's talking about dying, but no one's talking about death,
Mm.
right? We actually, right, there's all this talk about dying. Well, let's talk about death. Right now, of course, in this moment, we have to actually challenge death. We have to stand for every life, right? Absolutely, that's a given. We stand with radical activism and we bow to the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers and grocery workers and postal workers and, absolutely. And just feel how shocking it is that, again, there's all this talk about dying and no talk about death. So this is a moment, and this was a ritual in all the great traditions to experience the day of your death. It was in the Tibetan burial grounds. It was kind of core to the tradition, right? In Talmudic traditions, in Kashmir Shaivism, right? In native traditions, Aboriginal traditions, you want to die many years before you die, right? There's actually a moment in lockdown to experience your death. And the way to do it is simply go to the day of your death and look back and try and find, what do you desperately want to have done, right? So literally go forward in a kind of meditative process till you're actually at the day of your death. And then look back and say, okay, what didn't I do? Right, from this very deep internal place. And actually write down what you didn't do, right? And that will allow you to chart the next step of your life. So this is a moment to actually do this gorgeous practice of the great traditions, enact the day of your death in order to be reborn, right? In order to come alive. We almost never have that opportunity. And there's nothing more frightening than dying before you've died. Right? And that's what the great tradition said. If you want to face death alive in the sense of your aliveness, right? You want to face death without a debilitating fear, then you have to have fully lived, right? It's our unlived life that creates the fear of death. So this is a moment to claim that. That's another practice, just a genuine practice that I would invite everyone to do. This is the moment to be reborn, and we're reborn by considering our death, right, in a very real way. So one more thing. and this is about death as well. You know, there's a mythology around death, right? And the mythology is, and it comes from dogmatic materialism, which has no evidentiary basis, which is that when we die, it's over. I just want to say it simply and clear, that's just not true. There's enormous amount of evidence, both in the great traditions and since the British Royal Society was founded in, I don't know, 1885, and then the American version was founded by William James. We actually have about 130 years of documented, careful studies, from 3,000 documented cases of Ian Stevenson on reincarnation to, very, very careful studies by, for example, David Ray Griffin, who's the great Whiteheadian scholar, who wrote an important book on chapters 3 to 8 on the evidence for life after death. Right? There's an enormous amount of documented, cross-culturally checked histories that never existed in history before. We didn't have the ability to do this 300 years ago. We had anecdotes from different cultures. People don't realize this. People say, oh, that's pseudoscience. It's not. Or they have an a priori rejection. But actually, if you study the evidence, right, it's crystal clear today, right, that there is some continuity of consciousness. That's a big deal, which means you might want to rechart your life, because you actually begin to realize, oh, this is a dress rehearsal. That changes everything. I was working the other day, Iris, with a beautiful couple. And I said to them, you think this is about getting your couplehood well in this life, which is true, but it's about something much deeper. You're actually painting your image on the throne of reality, right? The way you do this relationship is actually determining the whole trajectory of the next and the next and the next, right? You're actually charting your path. So this is a moment to actually state clearly and unequivocally, it's not over when it's over. And that's not a superstition. It's not a myth. It's the best empirical evidence we have available today. And people are afraid to say it. So let's say it. Yay, death is a night between 2 days.
It's a what? Say that again.
It's a night between 2 days.
Oh.
Right? Death is a night between 2 days. And that's a big deal. And you notice, Iris, no one said it. I mean, we both must have read between us 5,000 articles, right? We read all the time, we're reading. No one's actually, and this is what's missing, these gaping holes in culture. Everyone's talking about dying. No one's talking about death. What happened? Wow. And so let's you and I together, and everyone listening, let's be the priests and rabbis and imams and, clerics and medicine men of culture. And let's speak it clearly, right? And it's a much bigger topic we could talk more about, but actually the reason I came a minute or two late is because I kind of stopped everything these 2 weeks, and I've been working kind of day and night, among other things, and trying to get a quick 30,000 word book out on death. So people would actually have a guide. So I'm thinking about that now. And just in response to this gaping hole, people are dying. We need to talk about death. Like, wow.
Yeah, and that's what I hear when, just before you got on, I was talking about, one church, many paths, one mountain.
Yes, our broadcast.
Yeah, is bringing everyone into the circle, regardless of what your path is. When I read that the first time, I thought, wow, that's amazing. It's an invitation to not split off in our different groups, but actually bring everyone together. I love that.
Right. It's beautiful. I mean, Barbara and I were so excited about it. One church, many paths, one mountain, is the realization that which unites us is so much greater than that which divides us. Right. And that we're part of a new story, and we need a global ethos for global civilization. But let's talk about something else, because I know that whenever we talk, my job in the world is to go wide and try and create the widest context, and you always bring me back to the practical. So I'll surprise you. Let's go back to a practical right now. What happened to Gafni? Right, what's wrong with him? He must have a temperature, right? So let's talk about loneliness for a second.
Yes, that's a
right.
Yes,
right. People are lonely.
Yeah.
Right. Just people are lonely, and just first off, to anyone listening, right? Lonely ones. Let's find each other. Let's hold hands. Right? People are lonely, right? There's a famous text that many people listening may know, and you and I grew up with some association with, right? Where did we grow up? Did we grow up in Egypt? Or where did we grow up? I'm not sure, Iris. Who knows? Were we in Tunisia? Are we Australian? I'm teasing you, right? But we both grew up with a relationship to biblical text a little bit in our culture. And there's a text which says, that was a little deadpan. You try deadpan, person looks at you and says, what's he saying? What's he talking about? Right? The text is, Lo tov heyot adam levado.
Mm.
And it's not good for the human being to be alone, but really levado means lonely.
Mm.
It's not good for the human being to be lonely.
Mm.
So loneliness is powerful, right?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's a big deal. And to find that,
Maslow's hierarchy, right? The second level is that need for connection, the belonging.
right? This deep need. You remember that movie, and let's send him a blessing because he came down with COVID, to Tom Hanks. Remember that movie that Tom Hanks did? Oh my God, was it 20 years ago? I can't believe that I remember anything from 20 years ago. But Tom Hanks did a movie called Castaway.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Was that a great movie? Right? And so there's this guy on an island, right? And he's actually made it. He's worked the survival thing. He's on this beautiful island, Caribbean. I don't know if it was Caribbean, but it was South Pacific, I think. But the point is, it was completely beautiful. He worked out survival. He had beautiful sunshine, great beach, lots of whatever fruit there happened to be on South Pacific islands, and he has this Wilson volleyball, and with his blood, he paints a face on the Wilson volleyball, and he starts talking to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for those of you, just to bear with me here, I think between languages. So this particular broadcast was a Hebrew time. So the word face in Hebrew is panim, face, which also means pnimi, interiority, inside. Right. And so when we can't connect with another person's inside, we feel life's not worth living. And so Hanks in this movie makes this makeshift raft. And instead of having this guaranteed next 40 years of life, grow old and die on the island, he casts himself into the sea. He's got a 3% chance of making it, but it's worth it, right? Because he's lonely. So when you think about it, Tom Hanks was in lockdown, right? He was COVID-19. He was in lockdown, and the desire to make contact is not small. It's not a small thing, right? It's a basic human need is to not be social distancing. We should do social distancing. Everyone should. That's an absolute requirement to flatten the curve. But let's do it better. Let's do physical distancing and deeper social intimacy. All right. So let's get rid of the word social distancing. Let's do physical distancing. We're physically distant, but we're actually more intimate than ever before. And we have to actually, since we can't touch people physically, and we all want to give each other a hug, right? The desire to hug each other, which has gotten pathologized in a litigious culture, is actually a beautiful human desire, right? I hug trees, small mammals, men, women, old, young. Let's hug each other, right? In the most beautiful and appropriate and boundaried and correct way, of course. But we need to be physically close to each other. So if we can't touch each other physically, just with even a handshake, let's touch each other emotionally.
Yeah. How do we do that?
So we do it by having the conversations that we've never been able to have. This is a moment for new conversation. Right? This is a moment, right, to have conversations you've never been able to have because you didn't have time, or because it was too raw.
Yeah.
I got if I can share with you, and maybe you have a great example. I got a letter about 3-4 weeks ago, and if he's watching, I apologize, I haven't answered it yet, but it was from a very, very well-known and quite profound scholar. Actually, this person happens to be a scholar of mysticism, who I knew a bunch of years ago, right? And at a hard moment in my life, he disappeared. And I got a letter from him, 3 weeks ago. And I was like, right? And I knew he was writing because of this moment. And I've been penning him a response. But it was this moment we're confronting the coronavirus is arousing death, right? It's arousing death, and we've got to save everyone and commit to everyone, to every human being. But it's also arousing it's this moment of encounter with death. And he wanted to write this letter before he, quote unquote, died, right? And I'm going to write him back. And I wouldn't have written him back before, right? I was angry at him. Where were you when I needed you, right? And that somehow matters less, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing in all this is really confronting our vulnerabilities, right? Yeah. When I'm working with single women, it's really about declaring that they need a man, not that they just want a man. There's a vulnerability in wanting a man. And with my couples working is to really declare their deepest desires instead of complaining about one another. So what you're asking us is to take off the shelf that vulnerability we haven't been willing to express, or maybe even face ourselves, to create something new, a new relationship, a new level of intimacy.
Beautiful.
That's what I hear.
That's beautiful, Iris. I was working with someone yesterday who's a dear, dear, friend and colleague, and we do what I call in my world Holy of Holies, which are, intense one-on-one sessions. We do deep dives of study. And he's a quite a brilliant coach, actually, of high level clients, and great, great human. And we were talking about need. And I said to my dear friend, I said, to say I love you is to say I need you. And he reacted very strongly against it. And no, that's codependency, right? And we can't need each other, and I need to. And I understand. And I said, I said to my dear friend, I get it, and you're right. There's a dimension of need which can go pathological and become codependent, in which I have no inner center without you. Yeah. And to say I love you is to say I need you. That's very, very beautiful.
My partner and I, at least twice a week, we tell each other, I need you. That's just
right.
Like this open vulnerability exposed in a good way. Like,
right.
This is my deepest desires. I need you in my life, not to pay the bills, not to repair anything around. I need you for those intimate things. And I'm not talking about sexual, that emotional intimacy. I can't do with myself, not what's available in partnership.
Right. And again, I don't want to knock the supporting or the fixing the stuff around the house, which are all important, or the sexual, which are all sacred and beautiful. And if he can pay the bills and get something fixed and have good sex all at the same time, that's fantastic, right? But that was deadpan again. That was a joke. Okay, but you're right. The need is right. The need is, of course, deeper, right? It's to know that I can be fully powerful and yet have a profound sense of need. And actually, the most powerful position I can take is to acknowledge the power of my need in a way that doesn't manipulate you, but actually invites you, that allures you. So I want to give you a gift. Can I give you a little gift? Just a little?
Yes.
There's a phrase that's the beginning of a chapter of a book I'm now, God willing, going to put out in about a month. And the phrase is, your need is my allurement. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes, I like that. I can
right?
feel it.
Isn't that beautiful? You can feel it, right? It's got a, so when you think about it deeply, and this is something I did some very deep work with my partner, the woman that I have the delight of living with, Christina Kincaid, Dr. Christina Kincaid, who's an excellent Reichian embodied therapist. And she's also a kind of a lineage holder in our Dharma, and working with me on phenomenology of Eros. And we were talking about, a couple of years ago, about the experience that Fairburn and Kohat, different theorists, talk about, which is the experience of having our basic needs humiliated when we're young, right? Our experience at humiliation in going to get our basic needs met. And that experience, and there's a woman named Martha Nussbaum, I don't know if you know her work, she wrote a book called The Language of Emotions. She's probably the preeminent serious philosopher in America today. She's about 70 years old. And, Martha, if you're listening, will you marry me, please? Your book is gorgeous, right? I mean, she's a brilliant, insightful, nuanced thinker. And she talks about this notion of, and she collects, right? She's at the University of Chicago, but getting our basic needs humiliated, right? Our need for food, but our need for touch, which are the two basic needs. So how do we heal those? How do we heal that humiliation? So we heal that humiliation when someone says to us, right, your need is my allurement, right? Like, wow, right? And your need is my allurement, that goes back to that word generosity.
Yeah. Not only do I give you permission for it, but I am, what's the word I'm looking for? I am enticed by it.
And I want you to be allured by meeting my needs, right? It's very beautiful. And this is the Dharma in this book that I had a privilege of writing with Christina, called The Return to Eros, right? And we talked there about this notion of the sexual models the erotic, meaning there were 12 billion years of Eros before sex. right? And Eros is the movement of cosmos, the allured movement of cosmos to create greater wholes. That's 12 billion years. At a certain point, that reaches a certain kind of dead end. So to create new novelty, so we go from asexual to sexual production. But sexuality is an expression of Eros. It's a model for Eros. But the idea is I want to live erotically in all the arenas of my life, not only in the sexual. But in the sexual, you get a model, you get a hint of something, which is in the sexual, right? We get in its holy sacred context, we get the notion of your need is my allurement. Mm. Very beautiful. So imagine, let's now extend that. Your need for attention and holding, your need for being met, right? Your need for nourishment, your need for education, right? Your need for employment, right? And as I stop splitting people out of my circle of intimacy and I say, your need is my allurement, like, wow. So that phrase came down to me like in the middle of the night, and you can feel it, right? Just like, that's it. Your need is my allurement. That's where I become whole again.
Mm. I love that. And I know, Marc, you've prepared a free offer for our viewers. Could you speak to that?
I did. Well, that is awesome. That is awesome. That is fantastic. I'm going to look in the chat box and see what appears in magic. What is, right? The free, I think the 11th hour. We did the 11th hour, right? I wasn't sure which one we did. I know Kirsten told me we did one of the two. Oh, that's such a good choice. Kirsten's always so much smarter than I am. Kirsten's a great scholar and thinker, and a lineage holder in this Dharma of unique self, and an excellent coach, and a brilliant executive director. So I couldn't say enough good things about Kirsten. So she suggested, which is a brilliant idea, that we use the 11th hour. So the 11th hour, and here we could get a little emotional. Gosh, the 11th hour, I recorded in the 2 weeks before Barbara died, Barbara Marx Hubbard. She came to Portland. She was with Christina, myself, and Shahat Courtney, you haven't met, who runs our European festival. And let's just be, funny for a second, right? Barbara would every day at like 4 or 5 o'clock come in with like 2 bottles of wine. It's cocktail hour, right? I would keep writing, but Christina and Barbara and Shahat would, right? They'd be doing cheers and salutes. In the middle of all that, we recorded this unbelievably poignant, beautiful, and really groundbreaking program. And it was the place that Barbara was kind of passing the baton. It was a very emotional time. She felt her fragility, although we thought she'd live several more years if she was 89, but she was filled with energy, but you could feel there was something. And it was literally 2 weeks before she passed, and it's called the 11th hour. It's about what are the new maps we need for reality? What's the new constitution, right? Not just all men are created equal. All human beings are born uniquely creative, right? What's the new map, right? And that's called, it's the 11th hour, right? It's 12 programs, right? 12 maps, 12 conversations that Barbara and I did together. It's actually up now on the web as a 3-day gift to anyone who wants to go get it, right? And we're actually starting, right? Iris, this is so exciting, and I want to invite you. We always promise to talk offline, and we never get to, so we have to get to do it. We're starting this Office for the Future, which is actually Barbara's term, and I want to credit her with that. It was her term. And so we're starting an Office for the Future, which is going to be the kind of umbrella of the think tanks, which is about articulating this memory of the future, right? This new emergence that comes from the emergency, right? And so the 11th hour is it's a fantastic offering, and everyone's like super, super invited to click the link wherever it will be. And it's up for now 3 days. It's complete, gift for you, but it will actually show you, it's a memory of the future. It's a big deal. And Barbara, I'm wherever you are in the continuity of consciousness, right? We're doing this now, and the promise will be kept. Yay.
Beautiful. And if there was one thing you would hope our viewers take away, Marc, you've given us lots over this last 45 minutes. What would that one thing be?
Well, I'd say 2 things. First, I hope somebody got my deadpan humor, right? Because, I hope, one joke got, okay, so there's one. Besides that, that's not what you meant. Okay. God, can I give you a formula? Is that okay? Just a 1-sentence formula? Is that okay? Just like, right? And I just want to say to everyone listening, I always get wiser when I'm talking to Iris, because she's always pressing for, okay, what's the essence here? And in that interaction with you, I always learn something. So that's why I always appreciate, besides the delight of seeing you, I always appreciate being here. So thank you. So here's the formula. The formula is, what does reality need from me in the next moment? No other question you ever need to ask. Right? And reality means in my circle of intimacy and influence, right? Not there and not there and not there. In my world, right? Don't ask what do I want to do, or what's exciting, and or don't even ask what's right. What does reality need from me the next moment? And you'll always know what it is. Right? That moment we got to drop in, right? We always know what it is. Reality needs me. Reality desires through me, right? And my deepest heart's desire, my own deepest, not my surface desire, not my superficial desire, right? Buddha said, have few desires, but have great ones, right? In the original Pali Canon. So my deepest heart's desire is goddesses desiring through me. Wow. Yay.
Yeah.
Ja.
Yeah. And with that, Marc, I want to say thank you for the time that you've given us, for all of this beautiful sharing, and for the difference you make in the world.
And the same absolutely to you, Iris. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.